The following story is from the History of the Kings of Britain by Geoffrey of Monmouth, around the year 1136. It was the day after a grand battle, and King Ambrosius of the Britons ordered the construction of a grand monument for those slain. For this, his advisor, the wizard Merlin, suggested an expedition to retrieve what he called the Giant's Dance. A legendary circle of massive stones standing upon Mount Killarus in Ireland. The king gave the order, and an expedition set sail to steal the stones. Despite fierce opposition from the Irish, the stones were uprooted, carried across the sea, and with the help of giants, they were raised on Salisbury Plain. So, Stonehenge, basically. Now, this is a fictional story, of course paraphrased by me, and cooked up in the mind of the same man who gave us the legends of King Arthur, the Isle of Avalon, and Milton Keynes. All mythical, probably. However, the idea that Stonehenge, the world's most famous Stone Age monument, has Irish origins is actually far from ludicrous. Ireland is well known to have interacted with far-flung regions throughout the Stone Age via a powerful culture who may have reintroduced megalithic architecture, i.e. building with massive stones, just a few centuries before Stonehenge would start construction. Of particular note are these, the blue stones. These are the oldest circle-forming stones at Stonehenge, which, in my opinion, form a monument typical of the Irish Neolithic. It is a link that is criminally overlooked. As my subscribers will already be well aware, I am no fan of the dubious connections often drawn to Stonehenge, whether it's the altar stone apparently coming from Orkney, now debunked, the overwrought nonsense around the Amesbury Archer, which is typically a case of people not reading enough about the period, or these unconnected papers on the Fulkton drums and Wine Mine. There is a silly tendency to try and connect everything and anything to Stonehenge, no matter how desperate it seems. This is also true of Orkney to some extent. We draw a line between these two UNESCO World Heritage sites and assume that both are incredibly important, without any real evidence. Except, of course, tourism. It's boring, creatively dead, romantic bollocks, in my opinion. However, for some reason, the finger is far more rarely pointed at Ireland. And, for the life of me, I have no idea why it's never pointed at Northern England. It was, of course, Northern England that likely saw the first introduction of megalithic circle building in England, around the year 3200 BC. Sites like Castlerig, Long Meg, the Lochmaben Stone, Swinside, Shap Avenue, and many others which seem to have popped up in the landscape seemingly out of the blue. Also of note are the Rollright Stones, which sit just 90 miles north of Stonehenge. They form a near identical sister site to Swinside, and as we shall explore, the stone circles of Cumbria are almost certainly Irish designs. Many of these sites are also known for their rock carvings, featuring spirals, dots, circles, and swirling lines. Here at Little Meg in Cumbria, for example, you can find this motif. Please just pause for a moment and analyse this pattern. Got it? Right, okay. Have a look at this. This is what's known as the Tiberaden Cairn. It is a mutilated burial monument sitting high up in the Wicklow Mountains, filming location for the most brilliant film of all time, Zardoz. And just like Zardoz, this monument is very, very weird, because inside it you can find this incredible rock carving, likely dating to around 3200 to 2500 BC. Obviously this looks almost exactly like the one on Little Meg in northwest England. There was clearly some kind of connection between these two areas, both of which predate Stonehenge by several centuries. Let's just pause there for a second. Do you like these videos? If so, please consider pressing the like button. And that is all. Now, have a gander at this. It is some rock art at Noath, a massive passage tomb in the Brunaboyne complex, Ireland. The swirling line that you see is believed by many to represent a serpent, though that's unlikely seeing as there are no snakes in Ireland. But let's compare it to this piece of rock art from Bryn Celyn in northern Wales. Obviously the art at these sites is a direct parallel, but there is also the sites that they sit on, Both are passage tombs, a style of monument that became popular in Ireland around 3300 BC. Now, Irish passage tombs featured something that we overtly ascribed to Stonehenge, which appeared earlier in Ireland, those being solstice alignments. Obviously, the people of Neolithic Ireland had some kind of affinity for the solstice sun. These were adopted across the western edge of England and Wales in the following 2 centuries. Rock carvings from Ireland started to crop up in northern England, Scotland and Wales. And crucially, it was around this time that megalithic monuments began to appear across Britain.
This right here is the western edge of Gameland's Stone Circle. Up there is Aesby Scar, and all around me is the Eden Valley. And it's in this valley that we find the highest concentration of Irish passage tomb art in England. Now, if I'm going to connect this to Stonehenge in some way, if tenuously, I'm going to connect this to Avebury first. That's because this has a very similar construction to the nearby Shap Avenue. Now, Shap Avenue was destroyed pretty much completely in the 19th century, but from what we know, it was a proper, legitimate sister site to Avebury, and it was made out of this Shap granite. Now, the people who built this were likely influenced by Irish settlers sometime around 3200 BC. Just going by morphological similarities between stone circles like this and some bigger stone circles in Ireland. Now, obviously, there's a lot of speculation going on here, and the question could be, why is it that this stone circle here isn't often connected to what's going on down south at Stonehenge? Obviously, Cumbria itself, in the northwest of England, has a lot more in common with the big megalithic monuments of Wiltshire, those being Stonehenge, Avebury, and you can sort of lump in the Rollright stones up in Oxford into that sort of group. There isn't a good answer for that. I think research in upcoming years will start to answer those questions and maybe connect the dots a little bit more there.
I have shown this example numerous times, but it's just so good. Coptow in the Lake District sits right next to one of Britain's most important Stone Age quarries, the Langdale Axe Factory. Although it's natural, it looks like the passage of a passage tomb, and it appears that someone with Irish influences noticed this. The face of these rocks is covered in passage tomb art. In fact, it is the biggest canvas of rock carvings in England. All of these align to the Langdale Axe Factory quarries. The stone tools sourced from up there have been found, where else but Ireland. So, not only is there an artistic connection between these 2 sites, but the tools themselves were making their way across the Irish Sea.
Top of the morning to you.
Passage tombs like Noath and Brinkelly D actually follow a very old blueprint, which has its roots in France. Sites like Gavronis and the Table des Marchands in Brittany, for example, date to around 4200 to 3900 BC. We even have passage tombs from this time in Britain, such as the Medway megaliths, which date to around 4000 BC. However, megalithic sites like these seem to have fallen out of fashion a bit in England, Wales and Scotland, and between 3800 and 3200 BC, people were building things like causewayed enclosures, passage tombs and timber circles. Some of these, like the passage tombs, were megalithic, but they were not circular, and they rarely aligned to the solstice sun. On the other hand, guess what the Irish Neolithic was still building? Yes, that's right, they were still building grand megalithic monuments, typically in circles. This is the place that stone circles, as we know them, first emerged. It was where the blueprint, the megalithic culture, and the religion that birthed Stonehenge possibly originated from. Now, I'm going to get wholly theoretical here for just a moment. Here is my theory on Britain's megalithic timeline. Cast your mind back to the early Neolithic period. I'm sure you all remember it. As previously mentioned, when Neolithic people first arrived in Britain, they brought with them the tradition of building with massive stones, i.e. megalithic architecture. These were in a style common to Western Europe at that time, and could be considered continental styles of monument. However, these were soon eclipsed by sites constructed from earth. Across Great Britain during this time, several types of ceremonial enclosures emerged, with two main forms dominating: cursus monuments and causewayed enclosures. This isn't to say that megalithic monuments disappeared altogether. Long barrows, for example, have very large stones within them, and the cursus monuments at Rudston feature the tallest standing stone in Britain. Nonetheless, there was a clear preference for building with earth during this time, especially for large ceremonial sites. It's now pretty clear that around 3200 BC, there was a big shift in the way monuments and ceremonial sites in Britain were constructed. All up the west coast of Britain, megalithic enclosures began to be put up in the landscape. These so-called stone circles are often misidentified, but when you see a proper, uncluttered megalithic circle, you know it. Aubrey Burrell dubbed this type of enclosure as a Cumbrian circle, and that is, funnily enough, the exact kind of monument that sits at the centre of Stonehenge, known as the Blue Stones. This, for some reason, is very rarely discussed. At the same time, Irish passage tomb art began to show up all across Britain, as far south as Dorset and as far north as Orkney. It's even been found in the east, at sites like Fylingdales Moor in North Yorkshire. And the east of Britain, for its part, introduced a new earthen enclosure, the henge. Yes, that's right, the development of the henge, which got its name from Stonehenge, came suspiciously around the introduction of the Irish Neolithic people. This style of ceremonial enclosure was perfectly matched for megalithic monuments, and featured entrances facing the solstice sun, just like those Irish passage tombs. So, in short, something clearly dramatic happened around 3000 BC. A new wave of ideas, symbols, and monuments sweeping into Britain, particularly along the western seaboard. Now, I don't think this was simple cultural exchange. To me, it looks far more like migration. Irish influence didn't just trickle in, it seemingly surged. The designs, the art, the architecture, the very orientation of sacred spaces shifted in ways that echoed what had long been brewing in the very heartland of Ireland's megalithic culture. And that, ultimately, is where Stonehenge comes from. I am Adam Morgan Ibbotson, and if you enjoyed this video, please do consider subscribing. And even better than that, press the like button, and I'll catch you all on the next one. I've been Adam Morgan Ibbotson, signing out.